Sorry, I'm a little emotional now. I wasn't expecting that. I was taken in by that. You know, those guys up here are just a little bit older than you guys, but they've given up their precious time this week to be here, practicing all kinds of skits. They probably didn't have to practice the dance. They probably knew the dance moves already. No, I'm just kidding. I saw them for hours before you guys got here practicing. They put in all this time, and I just couldn't help but be struck by thinking, why do they put in all this time? You know, it's because they've seen something, and they've come to know Jesus in a way that they didn't before. And they know that there are people and places responsible for helping them come to know Jesus like they do. And they know that a lot of those people are in this room, and this is one of those places. And so they just want to give back. And because what they don't want is for you guys to be so close to seeing God as he truly is, and so close to seeing you as God truly sees you, but then slightly missing it, you know. I was thinking about this. You know, there's an old story I'll tell you about the Pope. Who likes Pope Francis? I just call him Pope, but yeah, Pope Francis. Yeah. So Pope Francis was in America not too long ago. He was in Texas. Maybe you've heard. He was in Texas, and he landed at the airport, and the limo driver picked him up, as is typical for Pope Francis. And so the limo driver pulls up, and Pope Francis gets in the back seat, and he's sitting there in the back seat, and they start driving, and he goes, this is like my one chance. Maybe the limo driver will let me drive. Like, ever since I've been Pope, I never get to drive anymore. They're always driving me around in like the golf cart thing, and I never get to drive. And so Pope Francis knocks on the back window of the limo. He says to the limo driver, hey, I don't know if you know, but I'm Pope Francis, and I don't get to drive a whole lot, and I only have a couple hours in America here, and I just want to know if you would let me drive the limo. And the limo driver was in a real dilemma because he thought, well, I am a Catholic, and I probably shouldn't say no to the Pope, but I would get fired. There's no way my boss would be cool with that if I let this crazy guy drive. Who knows when the last time he drove was? I don't even know if he has a license. He's definitely not from America, so he probably thinks we drive on the other side of the road. He's like, there's no way I can let this guy drive, right? So he says, look, Pope Francis, I'm sorry, man, I just can't do it. I'll get fired. Pope Francis says, I totally understand. I'm the Pope, no worries, it's cool. Sits back in his chair. But Pope Francis isn't going down like that, right? So Pope, it's just kind of bubbling up. And so Pope Francis finally leans forward again and knocks on the window and says, look, man, I didn't want to do this. I hope you know I really wasn't planning on playing this card. But you're Catholic, right? I saw the rosary hanging from the rearview mirror. You know you can't say no to the Pope, right? And the guy's like, oh, gosh. And so he pulls over. He goes, all right, Pope Francis, you win. I'll get in the back. You come up here and you drive. Pope Francis is like, yes, this is it. This is my chance. And so Pope Francis runs out of the car, runs to the front seat, gets in the front of the limo, and now Pope Francis is cruising down the highway in Texas. And before long, the limo driver in the back seat is freaking out because what he didn't know is Pope Francis has a little bit of a lead foot. Pope Francis kind of has like a need for speed a little bit. And so they are now flying down the highway, and it's not long before they pass the old Texas state trooper. And the Texas state trooper pulls out behind the limo, puts the lights on, and of course the limo driver sees this from the back seat and is already looking for new jobs on his phone. He's on Google looking at the help wanted ads. And Pope Francis, of course, doesn't even realize that he's used to being escorted everywhere. He goes, oh, that's nice, they're backing me up. And finally the state trooper's going, pull over, pull over. So Pope Francis pulls over. The Texas state trooper gets out of the car, walks up, knocks on the window. Pope Francis rolls down the window. The Texas trooper looks in and then kind of freezes, looks a little closer, realizes it's Pope Francis, and goes, I'll be right back. And slowly backs up, goes back to his squad car, gets on the radio, calls in whoever his boss is and say, hey, listen, boss, I don't know what to do. I know normally when you stop somebody speeding, you give them a ticket, but I feel like this situation's a little different. Can you help me out? He goes, yeah, sure, what's the problem? I mean, if he was speeding, give him a ticket, but if you really think there's something complicated, what's going on? And the cop says, well, I think I pulled over somebody pretty important. And his boss says, well, who cares? What is it, some sort of celebrity or athlete? Who cares? Give him a ticket. And the cop says, no, I think he might be a little more important than a celebrity or an athlete or an actor. And the boss goes, well, what is it, the mayor? I don't even like that guy. If it's the mayor, give him a ticket. No, sir, I think he's got more power than the mayor. Oh my gosh. Did you pull over the president? Give him a ticket. I don't care who it is. If it's the president, give him a ticket. I didn't even vote for that guy. Give him a ticket. He says, no, sir, it's not the president. I think it's God. He has the Pope as a limo driver. And that was it. That was the punchline. Thank you. There's my front row crew. So anyway, I just want to leave you guys with that. I hope you have a really great night. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So what happened with the cop there is he didn't realize what was going on. He saw something, he didn't know what he saw, he was just kind of confused. This can happen to a lot of us. Sometimes we can be looking at something and not realize what we're looking at, right? I took my friend Rocco to a football game, and we were down in Tampa, Florida. We were going to a college football game, but they play in the pro stadium where the Bucks play. And if you've never been down to that stadium, what you got to know is from the outside, so we couldn't actually get tickets to the game. They were kind of expensive, so we just decided we were going to watch the game in the parking lot, because that's America, I don't know. But we were going to watch the game in the parking lot, and so one of our friends pulled up his truck, and we had this little TV screen in the bed of a pickup truck that we're watching the game on. Now, the stands at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa are really tall, and so from the parking lot, you're kind of standing, on one side of the end zone. And from where I was standing, I could actually see into the stadium. So if you'd imagine there's these huge, stadium stands, but I'm standing just enough to this side that I can actually see in the stadium. And so I can see the big Jumbotron. So I can see a really huge picture of what's going on. But one of my friends, his name is Rocco, he was with us, but he was standing like over here. And so we're both watching this little TV screen, but for him, the big Jumbotron is just out of view because he's being blocked by the stands. And once I realized what was happening, I decided to have a little fun with my friend Rocco. And most of us have a friend like Rocco who we love more than anything else in the world, but he's just a guy who you're like, he would fall for this sometimes, right? But you can't blame him. He had no way of knowing. So I realized that the small TV we were watching was on a 7-second delay from what was happening on the Jumbotron, right? And so I said to Rocco, hey, Rock, I bet you $5 that he catches this pass and probably goes for like 25 yards before he's brought down. Rocco's like, exactly 25 yards? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I'll take that bet. And so sure enough, on the screen, the play happens exactly as I called it because I just watched it happen on the Jumbotron. And Rocco is stunned. He cannot believe it. He goes, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And I was like, I know, man, I got lucky, but I'll bet you double or nothing on the next one. I bet I can guess it again. So I said, this time he's going to try to throw it to a guy like a little out route, but he's not going to catch it. Rocco's like, all right, whatever. And he sees it, and it happens exactly like I called it. And so Rocco's like freaking out. He's like calling people over. You guys got to see this. Dom's calling all the plays. It's amazing. And I'm like, yeah, man, I've been really watching ESPN a ton lately, and I've been studying and practicing whatever. Rocco's like, this is amazing. This guy knows his football. So I keep going with him. I keep dragging this joke out, and I am racking up Rocco's bill. He owes me like $100 by this point. And so finally I got greedy, okay? I got a little bit greedy. And there was a play where one of the linebackers actually ended up sacking the quarterback. And after he did that, he got up from tackling the guy and he waved his hand around in a circle like this. And so I said, hey, Rock, check this out. I bet you anything that left side linebacker or whatever tackles the quarterback and then spins his hand in the air. Well, there's no way, even if you study football, you can predict that, right? So, of course, it happens. And Rocco's watching it on this little tiny screen, and he just goes white. He just is completely frozen, looking at the screen, going, how in the world could Dom have guessed that? And then you can kind of see him start to get a little angry, like he kind of knows now that I've been messing with him. And so he just sends everybody away. He looks at me. He goes, I don't know what it is, but you tell me what's going on right now. And so I said, come here, Rock. I grabbed him by the shoulders and I just walked him over a few steps. I said, look, a bigger TV. It's amazing. And so he's like, oh my gosh, because now he can see the delay. And so what Rocco was doing was he was looking at the small screen. He was looking at the small screen. He wasn't looking at the bigger picture, literally. He wasn't looking at what was coming down the road. I was able to see what was coming down the road. He's kind of stuck in the past, looking at this small screen. And a lot of us do that. And one guy in particular I want to tell you about from Scripture, if you wouldn't mind walking into Scripture with me a little bit tonight. I want to tell you, and I'm sure you've heard this parable, but I want to revisit it. It's the parable of the prodigal son. Can I read it for you? Is that okay? All right. A man had 2 sons, and the younger son said to his father, Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me, and I will leave. So the father divided the property between his 2 sons. After a few days, the younger son collected all of his belongings and set off to Las Vegas, where he squandered his inheritance on a life of scandalous activity, a life of debauchery, a life of all the worldly pleasures. Verse 14 says, when he had finally spent everything, a severe famine struck the country he was in, and he found himself in dire need. So he hired himself out to one of the local citizens, who sent him to his farm to tend the swine, the pigs. And he longed to eat his fill of the pods on which the pigs fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? And here I am, dying from hunger. So let's just take a pause real quick and kind of talk about what's happened here. In those days, if you were to say to your father, hey, I want my share of the inheritance, I want it now. Normally that would come to you when your father died, but in this case the son is saying, hey dad, let's pretend that you're dead. Wouldn't that be fun? That'll make Thanksgiving really awkward. Let's just pretend that you're dead. I don't want anything to do with you. Just give me my share of the inheritance. Give me all of the things that I have coming from your riches, and I'm gonna go and do my own thing. So the son literally said to his father, let's just pretend that you died, Dad. And his dad, of course, is going to, grant his son's wish. And so his dad gives him the money, and he goes off. Now this son blows all the money, living some lavish lifestyle, buying into all these different things that we're sometimes tempted to think could satisfy us. But when his money runs out and all of his friends, who weren't really his friends at all, leave him because now he's not fun anymore, he doesn't have any more money, he ends up working and helping to feed pigs, which would have been extremely unclean at the time. I don't just mean like dirty, I mean like almost like ceremoniously. He would have been like unclean, like he would have never normally touched that stuff. And so one day, he's kneeling down, filling the buckets for the pigs to eat out of, and he's so hungry that for a second, he picks up some of the pig food, and he thinks about eating it. He's so hungry. And finally, he slams it down, and he stands up and he goes, this is crazy. The people working at my father's estate, even they have more to eat than I do. And so this is where he starts looking at the small screen instead of the big picture. He says, I shall get up and go to my father, and I shall say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you, and I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would one of your hired servants. So basically he's like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll go back and I'll have my dad hire me, because I don't know who this boss is now, but I think my dad pays a little better. And so even though my dad's definitely not going to take me in as like a son, he's not going to actually like love me like he used to, maybe he'll at least hire me if I agree to do the job well. So it says in verse 20, he got up and went back to his father. while he was still a long way off, his father, who was sipping a mimosa on the balcony, caught sight of him. I'm ad-libbing. There's no mimosas in the Bible. Everybody can just relax. His father caught sight of him and was filled with rage. And he took out his rifle. No, it's not what it says, right? What does it say? His father was filled with compassion. And so he ran down from the balcony and started running towards his son. And his son's like, oh, crap. I've never seen my dad run. There's no way this doesn't end with me getting pummeled, right? And so the dad's running up to him. And finally he gets close enough and he kind of winds up. And the son's like, here it goes. I'm going to get knocked out. And the dad just wraps his arms around him. And the son's going, wait a minute, this isn't, hey, Dad, maybe, look, here's where he goes, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you, and I no longer deserve to be called your son. He's saying all this to his father, and his dad's like, will you stop, just come here. And his dad's hugging him, and his dad calls out to his workers, and he says, quickly, bring the finest robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger. Put new sandals on his feet. And take the fattened calf that we've been saving for a special occasion and slaughter it. And then let us celebrate with a feast, because this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. And then the celebration began. Thank God that his idea of mercy is not our idea of mercy. You see, the son thought he was going to go back and be welcomed back as just a servant, just to work in the field or something. And the father said, no way, man, you're my son. There's nothing you could do to make me stop loving you. I don't care where you went. I don't care what you spent my money on. Come home. Come home, and I will always, always, always welcome you back. Thank God that we don't have to be stuck looking at that small picture of God's love. And so many of us are just so close to getting it. Kind of like my friend Rocco, who was just so close from seeing the bigger picture. He was just barely out of view, and a lot of us are there. Maybe we're not all the way on the other side of the stadium, not even close. A lot of us are just a few steps off. A lot of us believe in God's mercy, but we still believe there's a couple different things that we could do that he just go, no, I'm not forgiving that. Now you've gone too far. And so many of us, if we just took a couple of steps, if we just let our perspective shift just a little bit to see the bigger picture of God's love, we would know that when we run back to God after straying from him, this is incredibly important. Make sure you understand this. When we run back to God after having, done whatever we had to go do, not had to, but whatever we chose to go do, and we come back to him and ask him for his forgiveness, he doesn't just tolerate us. The father in the story didn't say, oh gosh, here comes that son. Oh brother, hide the TV remote and lock the fridge, and I guess we'll have him back and he can work in the field as long as he doesn't mess anything up. That's not what God is looking at you saying tonight. All right, fine, you can come back, but don't mess anything up. No, you're not tolerated by God. You have got to know that tonight. We are not tolerated by God. We are celebrated by God. The father doesn't just tolerate his son, he celebrates him. And so here's what I want to encourage you to do tonight, is to reflect on the fact that he will welcome you back joyfully. You know, the parable is called the prodigal son, but you know what the word prodigal means? The word prodigal, it means to spend lavishly, or to spend without really counting the cost. Maybe some of you guys, like for me, I know I do that. Most places I'm pretty good with my money, but when I walk into like a place that has like freshly baked like sweets, like a cookie or God forbid like a brownie or something, I'm just like, here's this card, here's that card, here's all the cash, here's my wedding ring, here's my watch, everything, just take it. I need the cookies, you know what I'm saying? So prodigal just means to spend lavishly without even counting the cost. And so there's some scholars who say that maybe the story isn't really the prodigal son, maybe it's the prodigal father. Because that's exactly what the Father does with his love and his grace. He just spends it lavishly without counting the cost, without caring if it's going to run out. He just takes that cooler full of that grace and mercy, and he just lavishly washes it out over us and pours it out over us. Maybe the story is called the prodigal father instead. And we can celebrate that we have a Father that is a prodigal in the sense that he is washing his love and his mercy over us without counting the cost. And so here's what I want you to do tonight. Don't get stuck looking at the small screen, the small picture. Don't get stuck in the past on a delay, just looking at what you've done in the past. Shift your eyes tonight to the big picture, where God is saying, come on back. I love you. Come on back. Come home. See, we don't think God can do as much as he really can. We don't actually, I think a lot of us believe in miracles. And so just tonight, go ahead and ask God for something crazy. It compliments him to ask him for miracles, to ask him to do something that other people would say that's impossible. It compliments God to do that because you're saying, God, I trust you so much. I believe in you so much. I'm going to ask for something just crazy that I don't think that, I deserve, but I think that in your goodness, you can give it to me. I don't just mean like ask for like a Ferrari, but I'm talking about spiritually. If you need to get out of something, if you need some strength, if you need some patience, some courage, whatever you need, peace, don't be afraid to ask. Let him in. Let him into your home. Let him into your friendships. Let him into your iPhone screen. Let him into where you work. Let him into your classroom. Let him into your family. Let him into your relationships. Let him in. He is faithful. Here's what's going to happen tonight. Lisa's going to explain a lot more of it. But tonight you're going to have one of the opportunities, and one of the things you're going to be able to do is to go to reconciliation. And you're going to notice that the priest is going to be wearing a purple stole. Okay? It's called a stole because he didn't buy it. He stole it. That's why it's called that. And I thank you. And my Catholic school education was very expensive, so there you go. It's called a stole, and what you're going to see that it's purple, and you might think, well, that's not really that cool of a color. Why is he wearing purple? In the old days, and I'm not saying this is exactly why, but it's something for you to think about. In the old days, back in like medieval times, when there was a messenger who was being sent from one kingdom to another, he would wear purple as the color of royalty. And him wearing purple was a sign that he was speaking on behalf of the king. You ever heard the phrase, don't kill the messenger? Or maybe, you've seen like in a movie or something where a messenger gets sent to another kingdom, and there's that phrase, don't kill the messenger, because here's what would happen. If you killed the messenger and he was wearing that purple, it would be an act of war. Because it wouldn't just be killing some little messenger. It would be like you were saying, I'm going to kill your king. Because when the messenger was wearing that purple, he was speaking in place of the king. So it's no different tonight when you go to reconciliation and you see that priest wearing that purple stole. You're not just talking to a man. You're not just telling all your sins to another man. That priest is in persona Christi. He is in the person of Christ. And so you can trust at that point in this room that you are speaking to the king. Amen? Does that make sense? All right, so I hope I gave you something to think about tonight. I want to bring up Lisa, I believe.